Welcome back. So it's another campaign. This is our first week. We're going to have 3 weeks of healing. That's the idea behind this campaign. And since there's different types of healing, it actually works out very beautifully as we're studying through the Gospels on Sundays. We're going to be studying the different ways in which Jesus needs to heal us. He didn't just come 2,000 years ago to heal some people in Palestine. He didn't just come for that person who was there at the pool at Bethesda, for the person who was paralyzed. He didn't just come for Peter's mother-in-law. He came for all of us, to heal all of us. And so what are the ways that Jesus wants to heal us, ourselves? We're so broken sometimes in the society that's so broken. What are the ways in which Jesus wants to heal us? So 3 weeks of healing. We're starting off, based on the gospel we just heard at Mass on Sunday, we're starting off talking about evil. Then we'll talk about the ways we need inner healing, and then finally physical healing. But the order is perfect. You can't come to Jesus looking for inner healing to heal all the wounds from our past, all the things we've been through, the wounds in our families, all the junk we bring along with us. We can't be healed from that unless first we get the poison out. You can't go to a doctor asking him to fix you if you're still drinking poison, right? Poison needs to stop first. And so we begin with freedom from evil. Freedom from the evil one, freedom from the occult, freedom from all that, right? Freedom from our sin, especially, which is the deepest form of evil. Sometimes we think of our sins as mistakes, or we think of the choices we make as mistakes, or we think of following superstition, or following all the different practices that there are in our community, in our neighborhood. We think of following other things as mistakes. But the truth of the matter is, they're mistakes that do us damage. And the mistakes that do us damage long term. And that can be holding you back from your progress towards God, from your growth and your love for God. Now, the reality is, we're in a battle. We can't overemphasize this, but the truth of the matter is we were born into a battle. Revelation puts it this way in the book of Revelation, chapter 12. It talks about a woman, and she appears in the sky, a great sign appearing in the sky, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. The way we usually paint Mary, with a crown of 12 stars, a woman clothed with the sun, with the moon under her feet. A little bit of what we see, for example, in the image of Our Lady of Guadalupe, or in the image of the Assumption that's here in our beautiful chapel. She was with child and wailed aloud in pain as she labored to give birth. But another sign appeared in the sky, a huge red dragon, 7 heads, 10 horns, and on its heads were 7 diadems. And his tail swept away 1/3 of the stars in the sky and hurled them down to the earth. And then the dragon stood before the woman about to give birth, to devour her child when she gave birth. And she gave birth to a son, a male child, destined to rule all the nations with an iron rod. It's telling the story of the battle between the devil and the woman, Mary, also kind of the church too, and her son, Jesus. It's telling the story that began in Genesis, in the very, very beginning of the Bible, Genesis chapter 3. The story of how there was a serpent that deceived a woman. And we're all her children. We're all her children in sin, children of Eve. And so it continues, as the story continues, it says that war broke out in heaven. Saint Michael the archangel, Michael and his angels battled against the dragon, and the dragon and its angels fought back. But they did not prevail, and there was no longer any place for them in heaven. The huge dragon, the ancient serpent, who's called the devil and Satan, who deceived the whole world, was thrown down to earth, and its angels were thrown down with it. The battle continues. This isn't just a story from the past. It's the book of Revelation. It's telling us at the same time what our past is, what our present is, and what our future is. It's all kind of wrapped up together. And as the story continues a little farther on, as the woman escapes from the dragon, it says this: the dragon became angry with the woman, since it's escaped her, and he went off to wage war against the rest of her offspring, those who keep God's commandments and bear witness to Jesus. The dragon's waging war on us right now. The dragon's waging war on us because we're the offspring of the woman too, because we are the ones who keep God's commandments and bear witness to Jesus. Jesus talks about the reality of the devil, of Satan. He talks about the reality of temptation all the time in the Gospels. As we end the Our Father, what are we saying? Deliver us from evil. Deliver us from the evil one. And also that God not lead us into temptation, that He preserve us from temptations, that He deliver us from the evil one. In the original Greek language, there's two ways to translate it, because the same words that you would say, deliver us from evil, are also the same words you would say, deliver us from the evil one. Both. We're asking both to be freed from the evil we do and from the one who tempts us to it. We're good at tempting ourselves too, but this is all about choosing sides. The sides were chosen at the very beginning, the very dawn of history, before creation even. The sides were already chosen. Michael and the angels that stayed with God chose for good. They chose freedom. Satan chose for false freedom. Satan and the angels that went with him that became the demons, they chose false freedom. They chose to serve themselves, but in serving themselves, they gave up the freedom to be in the right, the freedom to be in the good. When they did that, they began this whole process. It led to the wounding of this world and the brokenness of this world. Because there is no freedom in following just our own desires, our own inclinations. There's no freedom in following something that takes us farther away from God, farther from whom we're supposed to be, farther from who we are. There's no freedom in that. It's a false freedom. And it leads to all the dark ways in which we damage ourselves and wound others. We have to choose sides. Every decision we make, every choice we make today, you've made hundreds of choices already. In every decision, we're choosing sides. We're saying what side we're on. There's a way of describing the spiritual life. One of the classic models is this, that there's the purgative way, followed by the illuminative way, followed by the unitive way, which is kind of a complicated way of saying, well, first, we need to uproot sin in us. It's actually a lifelong process. It's not just one period. But at certain times of our lives, that prevails. First, we need to uproot sin and uproot all our evil habits. Then comes the illuminative way, in which God, little by little, leads us closer to Him. And little by little helps us to grow. Why does the priest wear green vestments during ordinary time? The time we're in right now. Green is the color of growth. It's the time of growth, and that growth lasts our whole life long. But then there's also the unitive way, which is the highest point, the summit of what we're called to in this life, and is sort of the very beginnings of heaven in us. It's the union between God and the soul, as it were almost a marriage, a mystical marriage it's called. But to get there, you have to start with the purgative way. You have to start getting out the evil from our lives, the habits of sin we've got, the ways in which we're constantly being led towards sin. So right now the question is, okay, how is evil getting into my life? How is evil getting into my life? A lot of different ways it happens. How is evil getting into my life? Are there habits, secret habits, sinful habits that are tearing me apart? Is there slavery to alcohol, to drugs, to any type of addiction, to pornography? Are there slaveries in me that are leading me to sin? Or is there just the slavery to gossip, or the typical thing I confess every single time I go to confession? What's the slavery in me that I need to be freed from? But let's talk also about something else. The first commandment. The first commandment. God said to Moses and to the Israelites, this is a version in Deuteronomy 5. God says, I am the Lord your God who brought you up out of Egypt and from the house of slavery. He saved us from the place of sin. It's symbolic of the place of sin in the Old Testament, and they were truly freed from that place, the Jews, the Hebrews. And then God says this, and this is the first commandment, you shall have no other gods besides me. You shall have no other gods besides me. And it's kind of easy for us to skip over this and get straight to the things we have more difficulty with, the 6th commandment about adultery, or the 4th commandment about honoring our father and mother, 8th commandment about lying. But let's stop just for a second there and ask ourselves if we're really looking at ourselves deeply enough when we say, am I living out the 1st commandment? Can I say that God is my only God? Because what am I trusting in? It's all about who I'm trusting. Because there's lots of people in our neighborhood who go to the psychic, or go to the botanica, or go to the brujo. What are they looking for? They're looking for someone they can trust, someone who can tell them the future, someone who can control the present and control their future, someone who can heal their past. But they're not going to God for it. They're essentially telling God, I don't trust you. If I'm reading my horoscope, if I'm into astrology, what am I looking for? I'm looking for the future. I'm looking to be told by the stars or by somebody on television. I'm putting my trust in someone, but that trust isn't in God. If I'm going to other religions or superstitions, when I was younger, I had a rabbit's foot on a keychain. What's that for? You're putting your trust in something else, in superstition. All those magical rites, they'll cost so much if you go and have them done by somebody. They'll cost so much if you go to the person in the village who's good at this sort of thing. All those magical rites, what do they gain for us? Nothing. Nothing but damage. Because the evil spirits will always lie to us anyway. And evil spirits are there when we're opening our hearts to evil, when we're opening our hearts to trust something that isn't God. It's the number one way to let evil into our lives. The very best way to get possessed by an evil spirit, which is something incredibly rare, but it happens. The easiest way to do it is to play with a Ouija board, which unfortunately is also one of the commonest ways that it can happen. Right before Christmas, I was at a Toys R Us looking for some, anyway, if you're in youth ministry, you go to Toys R Us at weird times and things like that, right? And walking in, not even 20, 30 feet from the entrance, on the shelf was a Ouija board. And the worst thing about it was only $18, and it was the only one left of all the other ones that had been on the shelf. So those are going into kids' homes so that they can play with something that appears to be a game, but is a method for invoking evil spirits. This stuff's real. We shouldn't overemphasize it. The point of our lives and the reason we come to church isn't fear. We're not running away from the evil one. We're not running to God from the evil one. But we need to be freed from his influence in order for us to grow as children of God and to let God's influence in, to be filled up with God instead of him. So in whatever way we're enslaved, temptation, superstition, whatever, confession is the number one answer. And maybe there's sins in your past that still need to be confessed, things you hadn't even realized were sins. Spending time with horoscopes or psychics or tarot cards or anything like that. Spending time with the New Age or Feng Shui or anything that's out there, right? Any way in which I'm sort of getting in touch with the spiritual world that isn't the ways that God has given us to get in touch with him, that isn't prayer and trust in him. So our choice is for freedom or for slavery. Freedom as children or slavery to things that aren't God. And anything in us that's still enslaved has to be renounced. Going to confession, what I'm saying is, I renounce this. I don't want this in my past anymore. I don't want this in my life anymore. I don't want the guilt and the shame that come with it. But then too, maybe you need to say a prayer and say a prayer sincerely to God, saying, I renounce every influence in every way that this spirit of whatever has influence over me. Spirit of jealousy, spirit of envy, spirit of lust, spirit of greed. Whatever it is in me that's influencing me right now, I need to pray about that, and I need to formally renounce that. And then invite God in. Invite God into my heart to fill up whatever hole that thing that was damaging me was keeping there. We need to be free as a church, as a community, We need to be free in order to grow. And so the first thing we need to do, if we're on this 3 weeks of healing, is to uproot that. So next week we can talk about inner healing that all of us always need. And then finally the physical healing that many of us all of us will need sooner or later, right? Because God didn't make us to suffer slavery. He didn't make us to be on the side that hates itself. He made us to be on the side that loves Him and that's working towards our total healing and our total wholeness that we'll find in heaven. So why don't you say a prayer right now in your group together before you get into the discussion, and ask God to enlighten you all to the many ways in which, well, evil can have influence on us, and help us all to be really honest with ourselves. Really honest with ourselves so that we can be honest with God in asking Him for freedom from all of our sinful tendencies, and to choose the path of light and to choose the path of life.